Hello there, my name is Sixo, but more on that later, as now it's time for a brand new Toy of the Week video. And today we're going all a bit retro in support of one of the most iconic Transformers of all time. Yes, it's time to get it on with Megatron. And not just any old Megatron, as our focus is on the OG version of the maniacal despot. You know, the one that single-handedly introduced a pathological fear of orange plugs to the Transformers fandom. It's this guy, who must be amongst the most classic cartoon villains from the 1980s, and is of course rocking that infamous Walther P-38 alternate form. And look, I know what you're thinking, that a character like this having an alt mode like that will somehow mean that this video is going to be inundated with terrible puns in true Sixo fashion. Well, I've decided I'm past all of that. This is going to be a serious video that treats the subject matter with the appropriate reverence. No ifs, no buts, no puns. I'm sticking to my guns. Alright, look, one or two might creep in, but I promise it won't be loaded with them, okay? Anyway, joking aside, there is quite a bit to be said about Megatron's original alternate form, as even though it's rarely been a thing since it was first conceived back in the 80s, the very idea of the dastardly Decepticon leader turning into a pistol has become so ingrained in the public consciousness. That's despite basically every version of him since turning into whatever the writers at the time can think of that makes more sense than him being a gun. I mean, it all kind of started back in Generation 2 with his rather unsubtle tank form ushering in a new era of the franchise, and I guess it's since become the mode that's stuck the most throughout all of the subsequent years, even making it onto the big screen at one stage. In fact, Tank Mode Megs is sort of the go-to alternate form these days, as the new Netflix War for Cybertron cartoon can demonstrate. Of course, we've also seen old Megs turning into jets and cars and even a shoe at one point, but there's something about the gun mode that captures the imagination in a way that a lot of the alternatives sort of seep into the background a bit. I mean, at the very least, it raises a lot more questions, such as, why does the most powerful Decepticon turn into a weapon for someone else to wield? How does he manage to shrink so much during transformation? Why doesn't he just shoot using the massive cannon on his arm in robot mode? And why does he trust Starscream to, handle him? In truth, though, all of the answers to these questions are very boring and involve a lot of made-up mental gymnastics, the likes of which are designed to disguise the real answer, which is, of course, that Megatron turns into a gun because his original toy did, and the cartoon and all of the other supporting fiction needed to sell that toy. End of. The really interesting question, then, is why the toy turned into a gun to begin with. It's well known that the G1 toy was a hand-me-down from the pre-Transformers era of Takara's toy lines, but unlike the robots that turned into cars, trucks and jets, it wasn't from Diaclone. Instead, MC-12 Robo Walther P-38 featured in the Microchange line, which was a subset of Microman and was all about robots turning into household items. And, guns, obviously. The MC-12 design was available in two colours, but it's the more familiar silver and black version that is of particular interest, as this is the toy that would eventually become Megatron, albeit with a few small tweaks. Now, you may have noticed the reference to Uncle on the box there, which is nothing to do with Auntie, the Autobots computer in the original Marvel comic, although now that I think about it, that would be kind of interesting. No, the Uncle in this case is the international counter-espionage agency from the iconic 60s TV show, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., with the acronym from the title standing for United Network Command for Law and Enforcement. Now, if you're not familiar with the original show, then you may recall they made a big screen rebooted version in 2015, which sadly isn't the film that is famous for Henry Cavill's mustache. In the original show, the characters are frequently depicted wielding the infamous Uncle gun, otherwise known as the Uncle Special, which itself was a heavily modified version of the Walther P-38 and was often shown with the silencer, scope and stock that the Megatron design has since become famous for. So it's amazing to me, simply amazing, that what started as a simple homage to a classic TV show has turned into one of the most instantly recognisable bad guys in a global franchise spanning almost 4 decades. Now, I bet the folks that jimmied together that Uncle gun back in the day never imagined that their creation would inspire such a long-lasting and celebrated character, or that we'd spend so much time talking about his lips. Anyway, history lesson aside, it's time to come smack up to date again and appreciate what I think is one of the best representations of that Walther P-38 alt mode that we've ever seen in the Transformers line. Now, there have been many attempts to imitate the design over the years, but none have ever managed it with as much style and, dare I say it, as much bling as this. It's the TakaraTomy masterpiece MP-36 Plus Megatron, and he's a shiny devil indeed. MP-36 Plus is a repainted version of the second masterpiece Megatron design and sees the dastardly Decepticon leader reimagined in quite a different fashion to his cartoon-accurate predecessor. Instead, 36 Plus is inspired by the original Generation 1 Megatron toy and features a surprisingly extensive altered paint scheme to that end. The robot mode is lovingly littered with little callbacks to that original design, employing a keen eye for detail and a healthy dose of nostalgia into the bargain. Of course, Megatron retains his original Walther P-38 alternate form, although now it's glistening to the heavens with some corking chrome and a magnificent finish overall. In fact, the chrome is without a doubt the first thing that anyone will notice on this toy, as it makes such a bold statement in either mode and sets 36 Plus very much apart from the matte finish on the original version of this mold. Then there's the signature carved detail on that chest plate, which instantly evokes a degree of 1980s sentimentality not thought possible outside of a Steven Spielberg film. Should you prefer, then this toy also features a plainer version of the chest plate, which can be swapped out with ease, though it still looks suitably sparkly in hand. Then there's this toy's piece de resistance, which is surely that newly sculpted head, itself a direct homage to Megatron's early design, and one that looks surprisingly effective in masterpiece form. There are still some options available though, as also in the box is a repainted version of the default MP-36 bonce, now cast with a matching paint job and a piercing set of yellow peepers. If you like that look, then you could even give the laughing face a go, which to my eye is one of the finest face sculpts on any toy in my collection in terms of how well it nails the character. There's even a shouty face thrown in too, meaning that you really are spoilt for choice in how best to display this figure. He has so many looks. Ultimately, both the more cartoony option and the toyetic face give off very different vibes, so much so that I still have a hard time myself deciding which I prefer on my shelf. One thing's for sure though, if you want a true kick in the nostalgia nuts, then the toy head is the one for the job, and it looks excellent matched against those wonderful tampos too. Areas such as the hips, arms and legs are all adorned with them, and in many ways they do more than their fair share of the heavy lifting in selling this toy as a homage to the 80s original. All in all, it's a strong look, and one that makes MP-36 Plus feel quite distinct in the Masterpiece line, even when partnered with the equally toy-inspired Masterpiece Shockwave. It's not just good looks being employed here though, as the Masterpiece Megatron mold is a true powerhouse in terms of posability and play value. In fact, I would challenge anyone to pick up this toy in robot mode and not instantly find some level of joy in cranking out any number of dynamic poses. There's a real fluidity and grace with the way it's all put together, and it just makes this one of the most enjoyable and lively robot forms I think I can care to mention. Naturally, there are some gimmicks in store too, including his signature fusion cannon atop his right arm, which also includes a light-up feature activated by the touch of a button. Then there's the gun barrel section, which can sit on Megatron's back, although can also be deployed to swing round to his front in a similar fashion to the G1 toy. It doesn't stop there though, as once you bring in the stock and silencer accessories, you can combine them to form a weapon platform highly reminiscent of that original release too. Alternatively, you can also utilize a few of these pieces to recreate a rather particular look from the initial design, which can only be described as gun face. So, there's an amazing amount of fun to be had with this toy in its robot form, but of course that's only half the story, as a large part of the entertainment comes from contorting him through his transformation process. It's a highly involved affair, and one that has caught a bit of a reputation online for being ever so fiddly, but in truth there's little to fear here if you're patient and take your time with it. Equally, I find a lot of collectors are nervous about the idea of transforming a toy like this when it's covered in all that chrome, but personally speaking I haven't found this to be a problem in hand so far, as the finish appears to be remarkably resistant. In time, it all comes together and cohesively clicks into that recognisable Wolver P-38 form, decked out with its wonderfully shiny finish. The gun mode fits into the hand well and presents very nicely overall, arguably hiding the panel lines and seams far better than its MP-36 mould mate. Of course, the nostalgic attention to detail carries over to this form beautifully, leaving you with a very pretty pistol indeed. Why stop there though, as it's an easy task to also apply the stock and silencer accessories and complete the full iconic look for this design. By this point, the nostalgia factor is so off the scale that it's hard to imagine any collector handling this form without making the occasional pretend gun sound. Overall then, MP-36 Plus is nothing short of a love letter to a classic era of vintage toys gone by. It makes me hopeful that we might see more toy-inspired repaints in the Masterpiece line to come, although even if that never happens, then at least they pulled the trigger on this wonderful example.
So I think whenever people see pictures of MP-36 Plus, there's three things that pop into their minds. Number one is how amazing that alternate head sculpt is, as it taps into a well of nostalgia quite separate from the classic cartoon noggin. Number two is that chrome, as in a similar fashion to how any toy that has even a sniff of gold in its colour scheme will surely inspire people on the internet to loudly warn you against the GPS! So too are collectors hardwired to break out into a cold sweat at the very idea of less than perfect chrome. And number three is, well, this.
Ooh la la!
And people say robot toys can't be sexy. Come on. Anyway, all of that is to say that MP-36 Plus is our toy of the week, and the good news is that he's still in stock and available from the one and only TF Source, so I'll go ahead and throw a link to their listing in the video description for today. You know, just in case you want to give him a shot. Right, a big thank you for watching, and don't forget to drop me a like if you enjoyed the video today, or maybe even subscribe to the channel if you fancy more of me rambling about robots. Quick final shout out to all my Patreon supporters: details of which are coming up at the end of the video in just a moment. Otherwise, that's it from me, so enjoy the rest of your day. TTFN.